we are, I asked you about Ghazwat Badr, and you mentioned that Mushrikeen started the war. Also, second one I want to mention, I think in Surah Al-Anfal, in last page, that Muslim in one country and they ask help from Muslim in other country, they cannot do that, or if this apply to the Middle East right now, when Hassan Nasrallah he say he want to defend Gaza, and this what happened. If we can talk about these two issues, Dr. Suhail.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. These are very big questions, not even one question. So there is something about the Quran, and there is something about the current reality, what's going on. And we always have to distinguish between the two. Quran states principles and the reality, but Quran and those principles are not to be implemented in vacuum. They are to be implemented in reality, and therefore there must be always that interaction between the text and the context and the intellect triangle, which has been frozen for a long time for Muslims, because we stopped doing ijtihad, so we are stuck and stagnant for a long time. But it should be always a two-way interaction between these three components: the text, the intellect, and the context or reality. Let's start with the Middle East first, and then we get to the verse in Surah Al-Anfal. Unfortunately, in the Middle East, it's like we are seeing only the tip of the iceberg. And most of what's going on, it's not visible. What we see the news, we see what's happening, but we don't see the deals. We don't see the things that happens, like say, under the table. And Muslims, it's a long overdue to realize that 90% of the politics is underwater. So if you busy yourself with 10% and spend hours every day watching the news, you're going to get nothing, because that's only 10% of the whole thing. So politics are to be understood by principles, not by the news, because the news can be misleading and confusing depending on which channels you are watching and which sources you are relying on. It's unfortunately, Palestine has been a very lucrative business for a long time. Almost everybody did business with Palestine, meaning they tried to further their own agenda, but under Palestine. Arabs, non-Arabs, everybody, Egypt, Abdel Nasser, nationalist, Islam, almost everybody. I mean, rarely there is hardly any exception. Everybody want to get, like, they know how dear this cause is for Muslims. So that's basically always they package their agenda with Palestine. And actually, whoever is yet to see that, especially this last week, I'm sorry for him, or for her, because for a long time people thought that Iran has, like, Palestine is people are ready to die and they're ready to go for Jerusalem, etc. That's not the case, and I'm not here blaming or criticizing or anything. I'm saying that there is mostly what's going on is mostly politics. People have their own agendas, their own priorities, and that's not necessarily something bad. But just don't try to mislead me. I mean, if somebody says that I'm pursuing my national interest, I'm doing this because of my national interest, I respect that. But don't tell me that I'm doing this for you and for this and for that, and then you sell me only words and you don't do nothing. I mean, that's not Iran, by the way. Turkey, the same thing. And Erdogan, all what he sold to people is words. But at the end of the day, he was pursuing his own national agenda and partisan agenda and his own political career after the first phase, in which he did great job transforming Turkey, of course, but then it became, it's about me staying in power, it's about my party staying in power, and maybe it's about the national interests of Turkey, and that's fine. In politics, that's understood, or at least it's not necessarily justifiable, but it is understood. But don't make any rhetoric. Don't tell me that I'm going to do this for Syria and Syrians and etc., and then you let them down. I'm going to do this for Gaza and for Palestine and this, and you raise your voice and then you do nothing. And so that's really, it's about time for us, so that we don't get into this cycle, because we have been through this cycle for a long time, for too long. Always raising hopes and then disappointments. It starts with the Nasser thing, and then big disappointment. And then there was exaggeration of the army of Iraq and Saddam, and then collapse. And then now exaggeration of Hezbollah, and then collapse. And then exaggeration of PLO, and then collapse. And I mean, it's about time for people to realize that don't go after illusion. Don't لا تطارد سراب or أوهام, illusions. Deal with the facts and be objective, and etc. So we were reminded these last couple of weeks. We reminded how backward we are, how marginal we are in this world. It was so obvious. So even you cannot deny it anymore. How backward we are in terms of technology. Between us and advanced nation, there are light years. Now we are consumers of technology. We're still consumers of technology. And then how marginal and irrelevant. And again, after what we have seen in Iraq, Gaza, before that Iraq, and then Syria, and then Sudan, and then now another tragedy in Lebanon. About 1 million people displaced in a couple of days, or in a few days. So we are counting tragedies, one tragedy after the other, one tragedy after the other, complaining, describing, watching the news, etc. But nothing is being done to stop this decline and this bleeding and this pursuing illusions, that you create some false hopes for yourself and you pursue them, and then you get disappointed. Again, it's I don't. You need to be clear with me. Are we talking politics, or are you talking religion and Palestine, etc.? Because these are very different things. If you're talking about politics, for example, Iran is concerned about being attacked, so it is trying to expand its influence in the region to defend itself. And by the way, the goal is legitimate. I'm not the means, but to protect yourself, and most probably to protect the regime. But don't tell me I'm doing that for Palestine, please. Don't tell me that I'm doing what I'm doing in Iraq and Yemen and Lebanon and Gaza, etc. I'm doing that for Palestine. No, you're not. And again, as I said, it's nothing against Iran. I mentioned the same thing in Turkey. Don't tell me that. Don't mention Palestine in your speeches and do nothing for it. So say that I'm care about Turkey and about its national interest. We have our own priorities, etc. I respect that. You say I sympathize with the Palestinian. I respect that. But to try to raise your voice and rhetoric, and then you don't back that up with the action, that's bad, because that's, respect my intelligence. I'm not stupid here. So that's in general. In Palestine, in Middle East, it's mostly all politics, but the civilians are paying the price. There are conflicting agendas. Now, all of this, I didn't mention anything about the Israel or the Zionists, because there is no point in doing that. Because there are things that we know. I mean, when you have an enemy, what do you expect? Yeah? They're going to be nice to you? So we know, we have seen this brutality from 1948 and 67 and all the wars on and genocide on Lebanon and in Palestine and Gaza and the West Bank, and we have seen it. So there is no point in talking about something that we all know and it's a given. There is no two people are disputing it. But I always focus on ourselves. That's the reality. What are we doing about it? Why we reached this point, and what can we do about it? Other than watching, possibly passively, and complaining and criticizing. And I think this is probably another wake-up call to tell us that no patchwork, no amount of patchwork is going to fix our crisis that has accumulated over the centuries. There is a very deep, severe, compounded, complicated crisis that has to do with our mindset that was damaged big time, our personality, our understanding of the religion, our even perspective on life. We were subject to major damage over the centuries of stagnation and oppression and etc. That no patchwork. Don't tell me if I do these couple of things, no. It is about time to realize that without fresh start, without revisiting a lot of things that we took for granted, without having the courage to see the reality as is, no matter how brutal it is, and to take responsibility for what happened to us, and to take responsibility, take charge for changing it, we are going nowhere. This is going to continue. Unless we reach that point that, you know what, this is not superficial, this is very deep, very intertwined crisis, multidimensional. It requires for us to rediscover our religion, because the one that we have has nothing to do with the original one. Rediscover the true original Islam, embraced as a life mission, understand and fulfill our mission and the ultimate purposes of our deen, and understand the reality and be realistic. Because this emotional thinking and exaggeration of things is not leading us anywhere. It's leading us only to repeated disappointment. Even the Arab Spring, people thought they had a lot of hopes and aspiration, and then turned all to disappointment. Why? Because our problem is much bigger than changing a regime or removing a dictator. In some countries that happened, but no changes. Nothing happened on the ground. So that's about at least this first part of the question. We can talk later about the second part of the Surah Al-Anfal.
Can you talk a little bit about Ghazwat Badr, and that the Muslim, they did not start with the war and, try to combat what's going on in the Middle East?
I mean, it's a lot of time, there is something in Islam called qiyas, which is to compare current situation with something in Quran or something in the Sirah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But it has to be done correctly. Otherwise, it's going to become false qiyas. And it's very delicate. It has to be done right. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if people are saying that because the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in Battle of Badr had an army that is only 1/3 of the army of Quraysh and much less equipped, and yet they won the battle, which is, all of this is true. And therefore, based on that, we can do the same anytime. That's wrong. because then you have to get into the details. That this war was imposed, this battle was imposed on the Muslims. They did not choose to fight. Quran is very clear, and Sirah, that when the caravan of Abu Sufyan escaped, the Prophet ﷺ wanted to go back to Medina, but by that time the army from Quraysh, led by Abu Jahl, came to rescue, to support the caravan, and Abu Jahl insisted on fighting. And even the Quran says, I mean, وتودون أن غير ذات الشوكة تكون لكم, because this was the first test for Muslims. They wished, Quran is telling, because I mean, we revere the companions, but they are a human being. We forget sometimes that they are a human being. They have emotions, and they have, like us. Quran is telling them that you wish that you get the caravan, not end up fighting. That's their preference, and that's very human being. It will be inhuman to say, no, I don't like the easy, I like the hard one. No. So إذ يعدكم الله إحدى الحسنيين وتودون أن غير ذات الشوكة تكون لكم. People wanted or wished that they can intercept the caravan and avoid fighting. So Quran is very clear that that's not what Muslims want. That was imposed on them. Two conditions were met. The two conditions for the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were met. People have the sincere intention fi sabilillah. And second, they did everything they can. This battle was imposed on them, so they organized, they arranged, they changed their camping ground because of the advice of one of the companion. They did everything they can. Those two conditions, whenever they met, you can count on the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it happened. And it made the difference. But if we switch to the Battle of Uhud, we can see two phases. In one phase, the same thing repeated. Muslims were much, much outnumbered, and less equipment and less everything. But they were sincere, the intention, and people had very good, they did what they can in terms of military tactics and strategy. They won the first phase. But then the two conditions, Quran says, the two conditions were violated. One is people start worried about the spoils of war and ghanaim, so it's no longer fi sabilillah. This is not all the companions, but Quran says, minkum man yuridu dunya wa minkum man yuridu al-akhirah. And some of the companions were surprised. They never thought that some of them, they are after the worldly gains. So one, it's no longer pure fi sabilillah, the intention. And second, the people whom Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed and placed on the mountain to protect their back, and he was so clear about with them, told them, if you see us finishing the enemies all together, don't come down. Don't come down from the mountain. Because Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam always teaches by extreme examples, so that you don't have to worry about other scenarios. So extreme scenarios, we finish them completely. Don't come down. And if you see them finishing us completely, don't come down. Because he realized that's to tell them how severe and critical their responsibility is. Yet, once Quraysh was fleeing the battlefield, these people, they came down because they were worried. I mean, and you cannot blame these people, even though Quran was very harsh. I mean, these are very poor people, and Ghanaim, and they're still in transition. And the Ghanaim, or the spoils of war, was something big for people. They were living on it. So for them to be worried that they may not get their share, that's very human. It's a mistake, big mistake. But when you remember that the companions, great but human. So they have the same emotions like everybody else, and they are not infallible. No one has the asthma, no companion. So people, they were worried, they came down, and Khalid bin Walid noticed that, so two conditions were violated, then you are on your own. That's why Quran, in this passage, in Surah Al-Imran say, إِنْ يَنْصُرْكُمُ اللَّهُ فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ وَإِنْ يَخْذُلْكُمْ فَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْصُرْكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. If Allah is support you, if you meet those conditions, nobody can defeat you. But if Allah let you down, then you are on your own. وَإِنْ يَخْذُلْكُمْ, if you don't meet those conditions, then you are on your own, which means it's going to be balance of power. And I don't think nowadays that we can claim that there is something like, there is a phenomenon in the Muslim world who meet probably the two conditions of being purely devoted to Allah, and then to do everything they can with calculations and planning and scenario analysis, that of scenario A, plan B, plan C, and that's how advanced nations work. And you all know, you work, some of you at least worked in American corporation, and they know people, they don't do things day to day. There is a plan A, there is plan B, there is contingency plans, etc. People pull them from the drawer. When things turn in the wrong direction or in different direction, people, they have plans for that. So, and we're nowhere close to think systematically and objectively, and then have long-term plans and have the patience that things do not happen overnight. It just, you have to work day in, day out for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it takes until you get the job done. But waiting or hoping for quick changes or quick achievements, it's not going to happen. You have a demonstration for Gaza and you expect there are things to change or policy, it's not going to happen. You petition, press conference, press release, etc. Yes, it makes you feel good that you did something, but you have to be realistic. That's not what changes policies, and that's not how you can effectively advocate a cause. It takes years, it may take even decades to change the public perception and to change the policies. It's very sad, Allah, when you look at the map. By the way, the tragedy in Sudan, it's much, probably in terms of numbers, it's probably bigger than, it's the biggest now. Yet, not much attention is paid to it. It's very serious threat of famine, millions of people displaced. It's horrible. And this is something of our own doing. It's inside. So, and now to see the Lebanese sleeping in the street. And of course, the tragedy of Gaza cannot even be described. It's beyond the human imagination when people are escaping from one place to another and then just to be bombed in the new place. And they're told that this is a safe haven, and then to be bombed in that heaven. And then it's beyond. And when you see people losing all their families and their houses and their business, and it's beyond even imagination.
It's meaning, Dr. Suhail, we should go with peace with Israel. I think we should go with peace with Israel. I don't know if they will accept it or not, but I think we need to offer them. You know, what's going on in Lebanon, everybody feels bad for the Lebanese. But same thing, you have, well, I am not defending them, but there is 100,000 Israelis. They are refugees inside Israel. And nobody tell me they are not from this land, they need to go back home. I don't know where these people come from. I know, but these people, some of them fourth generation born in Israel. You cannot tell them just go back home. They have no home to go back right now. It's very
And
complicated, and
yeah, you answered your question. I mean, it's too complicated to say something now here in few minutes, the solution. But if we can say something, is that in complicated cases like this, and in politics in general, the wise or wisdom requires to keep all your options open and not to rule out any option. Don't say this is my only option, because sometimes you have to clearly see the reality and see what you can do now and what you can do in the future. But don't go after your emotions or after your wishes. Nobody likes occupation, and occupation is condemned even by the international law. And occupation has to end, and people who are occupied, they have the right to resist for armed resistance. That's the United Nations says, and the international law say that. But if you have a right, when to use it and how to use it? It doesn't mean that just go and use it anytime, any moment, because it sometimes might be suicidal. So I say that the purpose should be to liberate the land, but the means you need to be flexible about them, and strategic and tactical. Strategic and tactical. You know that I think you have heard this before, that Khomeini, when he stopped the war with Iraq, he said it was what he said, تجرع كاس السم. It's a cup of poison that he had to drink, which means it tells you something about politics. It tells you that that's not what he wanted to do, but he realized that's the best, the better decision or the best course of action with whatever agenda he has. Because when you evaluate somebody, you evaluate them inside their agenda, not according to your agenda. So whatever his framework, it brought him to the point to make a decision that he hates, to the point that he said that it was as if I was drinking a cup of poison, when he decided or accepted to stop the war with Iraq, which was provoked by Iraq, by the way. I mean, so just for the history. But just to tell you this, that keeping only one option, because we hear this all the time in Muslim politics, that's the only option. We have no option. No, you always keep all your options open, and then distinguish between what is strategic and what is tactical, and distinguish between what you can do today, what you cannot, and be realistic with yourself. Don't fool yourself. So if you tell me, I don't think anybody has a quick answer or quick solution for this complicated problem and crisis that is now more than 100 years old. I mean, if you start from the Balfour promise, we already passed the 100-year. There is no easy solution, but I'm for keeping all your options open and use the mind, not the heart, when it comes to politics. You can have very warm heart, but you have to have very cool mind, so that you make decisions come out of here. We have seen leaders doing things they don't like to do when they realize that's the best interests of their country. Now, you like it or you don't like it, that's up to you. But when you see, just I'm going to give you an example of Erdogan, for example. All the attacks on the Gulf countries, and then when he needed them, when his country was desperate for their investment, etc., he just compromised. I mean, and it was, again, if you evaluate it in terms of politics and someone pursuing their national interest, that's probably that's the only decision, the only course of action available for him. I mean, rather than allowing his currency and his economy to collapse. So, so I'm mentioning that as an example of the right decision at the right time. Always, it's not a decision is not necessarily right or wrong. It's the timing, because there is a right decision made the wrong time and it becomes bad. So, so it's not only the right decision, but also the right timing. So to summarize, I see people who ever concerned about Palestine should put the liberation of the land as their ultimate purpose. And then when they start planning, they have to keep all their options open. Which one brings more gains and less damage, or the good and the harm? Which one? Because we are required to go for the course of action that brings maximum good benefit and minimum harm. Now, there can be debate about this. It's like there was a debate about the October 7th. There can be debate about what is the list of gains and what is the list of harm, and is it worth it? But that's a healthy debate. Whoever has a different opinion should not be suppressed. That's a healthy debate, should be run among Palestinians, but don't say that you are traitor just because you have a different opinion. No. All what we're saying is we have the same goal, and what we're saying is which course of action brings more benefit or get us closer to the liberation of land. Which course of action now? We're not talking about 10 years from now, because that things can change. There is a dynamic balance of power can change, but which course of action? We should learn to have these discussions quietly and without accusation, without somebody saying, no, you are, if I differ with you about Islam, then you are a kafir. If I differ with you about politics, then you are a traitor. No, people can differ. I mean, people can say that I believe there is another course of action. So that should be on the table, and everyone. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that Arafat has made when he said that peace is our only option, which means that you no longer have something to negotiate with. It's not like peace or no. When you say this is my only option, you lose any negotiating power. But when you come with different options, that's where people can give and take with you. But when you say that's same thing when you say my only option is war. I mean, the biggest mistake that Nasrallah has made and caused him his life is his last speech. When you make that challenge that as long we're living, or etc., the Israelis are not going to go back to their, that's, even though this Hezbollah in general, in terms from political perspective, is doing much better than many other parties and organizations, because they're pragmatic and they strategize, etc. But that's a terrible mistake. Why? Because you ruled out all your options, and you, as they say in Arabic, you took the ladder, and now the ladder was taken out. You cannot come down because you put yourself in a corner. You didn't say this and that or negotiating. So anyway, again, miscalculations happening again. Exaggeration of power is happening again. Underestimating the other side is happening again, and again, and again. Now, in our generation, in our life, we have seen this happening several times, of exaggerating our own power, underestimating the other side, and then we end up in this, and miscalculations. Miscalculation after miscalculations.
Assalamu alaikum. Are we going to talk about Jala and Falakhat this time or next week, inshallah?
About?
Last week we were thinking of talking about the difference between Falakha, Jala.
Inshallah, next week. Inshallah.
Assalamu
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Sahel, my question is, like, when we look at the situation and the genocide in Gaza, and now we are seeing similar catastrophes that's going to happen, maybe even worse in Lebanon. And this can result in a lot of trauma for a lot of us, and especially those who have roots there. And like at times it can also be, impact a lot of time it impacts our iman seeing this, and at the same time seeing the other side only achieving more and more, and while the oppressed are in a more worse conditions. So like, how do we deal with this? How do we interpret this? Feeling that nothing is changing. If anything, it's getting worse.
Well, you interpret it simply that we have been in a state of decline for centuries and stagnation, and the world is moving. That's why we are very marginal and very irrelevant. And we keep looking and hoping for quick solutions and easy solution, and there are none. That's so in addition to what I said about miscalculations, but it is long overdue that people realize that the solving a crisis that compounded over centuries, it's not going to happen quickly or overnight or by one move or one decision. Weakness, and we are yet to address, never mind to solve, the root cause of the occupation to begin with. Why people were occupied, why Muslim countries, why Muslims in the span of a short time went from superpower in the world into countries that were divided among the superpowers and occupied. Until now, we are yet to address what happened, why we became so weak, how and why. Because that happened over centuries. And it starts a long time ago, as we mentioned before. What we addressed was the occupation itself, which was the symptom. And the consequences, not the solution, not the root cause. So what do we do? And that should have been done. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. All Muslim population rallied to liberate their land, to push those colonizations out. But nobody, or it was not realized that we dealt with the symptoms. Symptoms is we did not tackle the root cause. And we repeated that over and over again. We repeated when the Islamic movement came and said, our problem is that Muslims are not in the masjid, women are not wearing hijab, Muslims have abandoned mosques. So what is the solution? Bring people back to Islam. Go to the coffee shops, go to everywhere, bars, etc. Bring people to the masjid. Alhamdulillah, mission accomplished. Very successful work, but no change. Nothing happened. Why? Because we did not treat the root cause again. Muslims did not abandon prayers and fasting so that if they start praying and fasting and stop drinking, things will work out. No, it's much bigger than that. And then we repeated recently when we said that, when we thought that the problem is dictatorship. So if we mobilize the masses and topple those regimes, inshallah, we'll be on track towards progress and prosperity. It didn't happen. I tell you, Tunisia, Libya, at least these, Egypt and Yemen. In all these 4 countries, the dictatorial regimes were toppled. Do you see any change in those countries? Yeah. So forget about like Syria, which did not even go all the way. We're talking about even the ones who succeeded. So mission accomplished again, but no change. Why? Because in all these cases, the assessment and the diagnosis was very superficial, very partial, and therefore when we solved what we perceived to be the problem, nothing happened. It's like, you know, they say the surgery was successful, but the patient died, or the patient did not improve, but the surgery was successful. So what do we care? Why should we care about surgery being successful if the health of the patient did not improve? So it's a long overdue that elite masses to really have that soul-searching exercise, which is going to be very painful, to address the big question of, before we address the question of how do we fix it, we need to address the first question of how and why we came to this point. Because no treatment can be successful without the proper diagnosis. Bring me the best physician in the world, cannot give you a treatment, a good treatment, unless they understand what is your problem. It is long overdue to ask ourselves why and how we came to this point, and to be sincere and frank, and not to be, and to have the courage and the bravery to accept that if it is deep, then it is deep. There is no point in glossing over the crisis. And as I mentioned before, the root causes goes way back in our history. The consequences blow out in our faces maybe recently, in the last century. The collapse of the Dawla al-Uthmani Khilafah or state, and then the colonization. But that's, things were cooking and brewing all these centuries.
Yeah. I just was thinking about this topic. I think you also touched on it last week, that nothing is happening no matter what we do. Even if you go back to, this, basic rituals of Islam. I was thinking on that point, but I came to the conclusion there are 2 things that went wrong. I mean, this is my opinion. I may be wrong. First of all, that the salat and the rituals also, we are not doing with sincerity. It's not transforming us, number one. Even if we are doing it on a very superficial level, not with the spirit of Islam, not with the passion, not with the iman that the Prophet, Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ preached. And the second thing is the corruption ma'amilat. We went into, I think the downfall was because, like the Prophet ﷺ predicted, that we would go towards the materialism. He was afraid of not shirk, but that the ummah is going to indulge in richness, of the mataul wurunas, that's small things of the world and the worldly glitter and the glamour. So I think these 2 things, in my opinion, if we can correct the ma'amilat, and the corruption is because of this in all countries.
You are right, but even before that, before the fact that the quality of our rituals is not producing its effect because it's a poor quality, and because we are doing it for the wrong reason. We're doing it just because we don't want to be thrown in hellfire. It's no longer that ibadah that is coming out of the tremendous love of Allah and the gratitude that you want to express it in ibadah. It became something that I just have to check the box. I have to do it because none of us want to be punished. So in addition to that, in addition to what you mentioned, even before that, those rituals were prescribed for mission-driven Muslims. There are Muslims who committed themselves to Islam as a mission and committed to fulfill the purpose of Allah, the divine purpose. Muradillah. They said, they signed that they are ready to do that no matter what it takes, whatever the price, even if it is their lives. For these people, the rituals were prescribed to strengthen them, support them, strengthen their faith. That's why the companions were described as monks at night, رهبانا بالليل فرسان بالنهار. These people have a very demanding mission, very taxing and exhausting mission they fulfill during the day. And therefore, during the night, they need to refuel spiritually. And even during the day when they pray. And when Ramadan comes, they recharge their batteries, their spirituality, etc. Nowadays, those rituals are being performed by people who have no mission. So they lost their purpose. The rituals in Islam and the personal fiqh, by the way, the rituals, salah, fasting, etc., and the personal fiqh, haram, zina, khamr, etc., these two are components of a big paradigm. They are parts of a body paradigm. That paradigm, the foundation of that paradigm is Tawheed, faith, Risala, mission, maqasid, ultimate purposes. That's what people commit themselves to first. And then they were given these from favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows us more than we know ourselves. He knows that those who are going to fulfill that mission, they need those rituals. And they need to stay away from these things that are haram, because these are harmful for them, can distract them from their mission, and can waste their energy and their money, etc. So basically, to help us focusing on our mission, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed the rituals and prescribed the personal fiqh, which is what is halal and what is haram. Our mistake is we allowed that paradigm to collapse, and then we took these two components and called them Islam. So what is Islam nowadays? If you pray and fast and pay zakat and perform hajj, and if you're not drinking and if you are not committing fornication, and if a woman, you are wearing hijab, are you doing, and you are a good Muslim? No, that's not true. These are two pieces of a big puzzle that has collapsed and that needs to be rebuilt, needs to be rediscovered. And if you're going to rebuild it, is to, the first step is the step that the Prophet ﷺ did, which is to commit to introduce Islam as a mission, life mission, and commit people to that mission, and then tell them what other things they need to do in order to fulfill that mission effectively.
Yeah. For my other WhatsApp group, I just sometimes, most every day, basically pick one verse from the Quran, which during, Fajr Quran that I read. So this time I picked up this one, and I think it's very correct. You want me to read the whole thing, or
يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم.
And the answer is in the next surah too.
Yes.
Yes. We have to do it.
Yes. Exclusively. Definition. And I had probably those who attend khutbah, they know that I mentioned those verses repeatedly, and I dedicated khutbah to them, that the next verse that you mentioned is defining believers exclusively. إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون. Please, everybody, homework for everybody. Go and read the last verses of Surah Al-Hujurat and focus on these two verses and reflect on them. One of them says there are two versions, two different Islam. There is Islam of Al-Arab, superficial, and there is true Islam. And then the second verse will tell you what is that true Islam.
Brother Muhammad, we are out of time. Do you have any other? Brother Muhammad? Okay. Okay,
Assalamu
thank you very
alaikum.
much. Wa alaikum salam.
Alaikum
1
salam.
minute, Brother Muhammad, we are out of time.
Go ahead.
I will try very fast. Just to add another ayah from Surah Al-Jumu'ah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. And this is not only for the people who carries the Torah, but for us as well, and for everybody else. I didn't read the whole ayah just so I can buy some time. Brother Suhail or Dr. Suhail, mashallah, you don't keep space for people to argue or to even fill in the blanks, whatever you might leave out. But one more thing, or a couple of more things. The first one is that we never been freed from occupation. So we still under occupation, but with different faces. And the second question or the second comment is for for Brother Bassem, which is like, I'm with you. Let's go for peace. But we tried this route, and we see what happens with that route. Maybe the best route is to go and have peace among ourselves first before we go and cross the line. Syrians,
Yes,
Lebanese, and everybody else, Palestinians, we should look at us as a unit. We are all together. It was Bilad al-Sham. Everybody was within that area. Everything else that is happening around, it's a test. It's a justification for. It's like if we take what Brother Suhail is saying, if we take the lessons that we learn from all of these events, and we unite and we care about ourselves and care about the lives that is lost and care about how we move on from this occupation that we've been under control of colonialism for all of these years, things will be a little bit more different for us. We really, Allah Salmak. And I'm sorry for taking over or waiting, but I really I always love to give space for others to ask their questions. I learn from them, and and I really appreciate your comments. It's really insightful, and we always learn, and you make us think, and that is what keeps us coming back and listening to more and having those discussions. And hopefully, Brother Bassem, I'm not targeting you. I want you to understand that you are the one who's challenged. I feel like you challenge me to think a little bit, and I really appreciate that. So when I respond to you, it's better than responding to anybody else, because you're my brother and you know that. I love you, I respect you, and I love the way you think. It's like you throw things, whatever you have in mind. It's not you throw it. You challenge our thoughts. I really suggest that we should have peace among ourselves first, have a plan for ourselves first, the plan to have peace with the other side. We've been through it, we tested it, it's been 30-something years. We tried to respect them and have, not to respect them, to coexist, as they say. And we see the results. It's like the end results of this is kicking out the Palestinians from the West Bank to Jordan. And that is coming. If it's not going to happen tomorrow, it might be Syria. It might be another area, but it's coming. That's what we need to start thinking about. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. See you next Sunday, inshallah, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.